So I guess the first thing is, in your opinion, what is PR?
PR to me is an organisation's strategy. So it's working out who you are, what you mean to your stakeholders, so your customers, your employees, your board members, and it's making sure that you remain true to that kind of purpose in everything you do.
I actually quite like the CIPR's definition of PR, that's kind of largely based around managing reputation, earning understanding and influence. I think that kind of in that sort of that tough question that you're often faced with, usually by your sort of parents often, it's like, what do you do? I always kind of tend to find myself referring back to that CIPR definition, really, which I think kind of encapsulates a lot of what we do in the day-to-day a little bit, I think.
I guess kind of then building on that and that analogy of it, where do those benefits lie for a company and specifically sort of for an SME?
I think it's bringing to life their messaging and being consistent, and for me, working with SMEs, and a lot of the time I'm working with founders, it's like, who do you want to be? Let's start talking about it now, where I think for a lot of businesses it's kind of an afterthought, and PR can be like, oh, we should probably start doing PR now. And I think it's something that you have to integrate early to get the true benefits of, because it's a journey that you should always be on, as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think that people perceive PR as just kind of a promotional advertising tool rather than that brand management and ongoing?
Like an add-on, yeah. It's like a fun add-on to marketing, which obviously I've worked in marketing. That was my job, and PR was kind of an add-on to my title. Mm-hmm. It was something that it was like, oh, we should do some press releases. We should do kind of, do a bit of thought leadership, but not strategic, not long-term. And I think that it all comes back to brand, like what you want to be saying, where you want to be seen, not where can we get in now with this press release, which is basically what happens a lot with SMEs that I've seen.
Just to add on that, I think I definitely in my role probably have to go more towards marketing in a way, and I definitely agree with the fact that PR just is that sort of, actually we probably should do a press release now, we should probably add that service on, whereas as you say, going PR first should be the way, but I find the best organisations who are doing it well are the ones that are PR marketing are closer together, and work really sort of hand in hand. I've worked both in-house and at agency, and I found in-house there was quite a clear gap, quite clear silos between marketing and PR, which I think was unhelpful. It doesn't help anyone. There's almost sort of a defensiveness perhaps about each, whereas I think PR has a role in terms of bridging that gap, in terms of bringing the two together closer, leading, and then also bringing people with them.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the SMEs that I've worked with, there's still a bit of confusion around what PR actually is. So when you get asked to put out a press release about a particular story or activity, people then expect something direct to come back. So they expect that to lead to more sales or more bookings or tickets sold to an event. And that's not what we're about. And it's that understanding of actually this is about raising profile, this is about raising brand awareness, this is about positioning your organisation as a thought leader, not just this is about filling a sales funnel.
Mm. Yeah. Well, kind of PR as its own PR problem, doesn't it? In kind of in terms of what people's perception of PR is, and like you say, it's often that bolt on. It's kind of we should do a press release on this, and if that's people's perception out there of what PR can do for you, it's we've got a problem. But yeah, I kind of that education piece is massively important, I think, for what PR can achieve, really.
Going back to your point on kind of they want a direct result of sales or whatever, PR's always been a very tricky thing to measure and evaluate, and I think we can kind of all agree on that. But for SMEs, they're obviously still in sort of fairly early days of business, and every penny they spend has to be sort of very well measured, and they need to be able to make sure they're getting the right sort of return on investment for that. So what would your advice be for SMEs in terms of kind of benchmarking whether they feel that PR is being successful for them, and how to sort of look at that, because they can't get the direct stats of, yeah, this print piece in a magazine definitely got us 10 more sales or 100 more sales or whatever?
So I think there's the ideal is that before you begin any kind of campaign of activity, that you are benchmarking, and that maybe you've got the budget to pay for some research into brand perception and awareness and what messages have penetrated your target market. But when you're an SME and you don't have the money to do that, that's very difficult. But there's lots of free tools available where you can run even quite basic sentiment analysis on social media comments. You can go to where your audiences already are and work out roughly, like, are they talking about you, and if so, what are they saying? And then perform the same kind of track the same measurements after you've done whatever it is you're trying to do, and see whether or not there's been a shift. If you want people to be talking about you in a particular way, or to be using particular wording, or like to have, for a particular message to have saturated your market, you can work that out just by using even things like Hootsuite have built-in tools where you can start looking. So these things don't cost SMEs a huge amount of money, but it's about using them consistently.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's kind of setting those guidelines out from the very beginning, is understanding where that point zero is, and then helping that that particular client or that SME to understand what can be achieved, what is achievable. Whether it's a case of we can get you closer to your audiences, we can measure engagement rates or whatever it might be. I think it's that education piece in just enabling that SME to understand what you can do with PR, and it's not this kind of, sometimes they kind of get this mentality that it's this golden shot that's going to solve everything by kind of just by doing a press release once in a while. It's
PR does not stand for press release.
We've all been asked to do some PR.
Yeah, just do some PR. Yeah. Okay. But I think what Elliot was saying about it being better integrated, if you are working for someone or working with someone, that you can better integrate the PR and the marketing, it should be a lot more simple to see the tangible benefits of it. But as we know at the minute, things are a little bit too siloed, so that's probably why I think a lot of people unfortunately have the impression that it's a little bit smoke and mirrors with PR.
I think some of it probably unfortunately comes down to maybe an either or, whereas you can, as an SMA, you can pick marketing because for example, pay-per-click, what you're going to get through. You can give a number which goes against the cost, and it's so straightforward and easy to understand that when it comes down to, shall we have a bit of marketing or a bit of PR, let's go for the marketing because we get more for our money. But again, I think you're right, the fact that we've got a PR problem is about explaining PR in its essence and really showing that value. And I think for me, with the digital sort of proliferation of channels, it's got even tougher because the more you can measure through social media, through, as I say, paid advertising, it's going to be easier to have that argument to go that way, to go advertising route, whereas PR perhaps is a bit more thought out, a bit more, but again, considered, yeah. And I think, but it is more impactful. I would definitely say that if it's done right, if it's embedded into an organisation. But for an SME, have you got time to do that, or can you get a quick win for doing an advertising campaign?
I think there's an element that PR has opportunities, and it's starting to happen a little bit more. You take the Iceland ad, for example. They knew full well that ad was never going to make it onto TV. It's the PR that's kind of really made that ad a success. It's not the ad spend that's made that a success. And you would hope that somewhere within Iceland that's been identified, that what this campaign, which was kind of, is a real great example of probably being far more integrated. This campaign was going to win or lose on kind of the PR fallout from being banned from TV. It's the PR that's driven that. It's not the advertising spend as such.
And hopefully we'll see more decisions being weighted towards PR rather than marketing, as consumers are more purpose-driven, are more values-driven in terms of where we want to spend our money. So as brands realise that you need to articulate, you need to have a clearly defined purpose. You do need to stand for something if you want to remain competitive. Now, what you stand for as a business, it's very hard to do that, to demonstrate that through pay-per-click or AdWords campaigns or whatever. So that's us. That you need PR to do that, to be able to position yourself as a values-driven organisation. So I think like the Icelandic advert is hopefully the start of more and more brands and more big organisations saying, actually, we can do a lot by telling people what we believe and what we stand for.
I think the converse to sort of the oversaturation of digital marketing channels advertising is that the consumers are more savvy now. They won't necessarily take a lot from an advert. It'll give them awareness of a product or a service, but will it change someone's perception of an organisation? Whereas that's what PR does. It changes perception. It helps consumers or audiences in general create a connection with an organisation, with a business. And I think that's the most important thing. And audiences now want to develop a relationship with whoever they're dealing with, whether it's buying something or whatever it is, even if it's looking for a new job, looking for a new employer. It goes quite deep in terms of what you can achieve through having a connection and developing that relationship. And I think that's where PR needs to step in and say, actually, we can do this. I think marketing is probably quicker in a way because they've spotted things like, content marketing where they can do a campaign around, for example, no labels, things like that. That's in almost crossing over the boundaries of we understand this, but perhaps that's an example again of PR and marketing working closer together and saying, right, there's an opportunity here to integrate the two channels.
Do you feel like because there's more of an understanding of what marketing is and it is much more sort of tangibly measurable, it's something that's adopted much quicker, and like you said, PR is just kind of that bolt on at the end? Do you think that's something that is an issue?
It is an issue, but I go back to Laura's point. It's kind of, the PR's got this opportunity, I think, to be considered more important than that, to be kind of almost the conscience of an organisation, be the eyes and ears, and help a company understand what it should stand for a little bit, I think. And you can do that by going back and going, well, look, here's what your customers are saying, here's what they care about, these are the things that are important to them in their lives. So there's a sense that you kind of, it's tricky because when it's something crowbarred in, it just looks awkward. It's like suddenly, I don't know, Shell standing for kind of, plastic waste or whatever it might be. But it feels like something like Iceland grabbed something that was almost a valuable point. Nike was a great example with Colin Kaepernick as well, sort of earlier on this year, that they've always had this standpoint, Nike. Perception is that they can't, they're quite edgy in their perceptions, and so it was an authentic position to kind of support its athlete in that situation, and I think we've got PR an opportunity to be the people at that top table saying, this is what you should be standing for. These are the things that matter to your customers. Here's the evidence, and I think we can show them that now, and we should take that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Linking into that, one of the questions from one of the Converge members is sort of how do you create newsworthy stories for a niche SME who sort of has a very small client base at this point? So how those are obviously big organisations, and examples of that sort of for a smaller company that does have a very niche market, how would you sort of advise that then gets linked in?
It almost goes back to that previous answer, is go back and look and listen to kind of what your customers are demanding a little bit, and I think you can almost support their beliefs with a message that kind of chimes with that. I think on a very granular level, it doesn't take too much to sort of just have a better understanding of kind of what makes news these days and kind of what platforms are available to be able to disseminate that message. I think we sort of all talked about the frustrations of kind of sitting with a client and they're going, oh, but I want my, can you get a news story out about our new website or whatever it might be. It's like just understanding what makes news to begin with. And that's kind of as much the PR's job to educate the client as it is for the client if, you're an SME and you're concerned about kind of using PR, is to go into it with a little bit of education and understanding of kind of what is in the news these days. Is a fairly decent start point.
And I think as well it's asking the question of what are you trying to achieve with that news story. So sending out a press release and getting press coverage may not be the right thing for an organisation at that point to achieve what they're trying to achieve. So if they're looking for new clients, there's other tactics, there's other channels that they could use. So not assuming that press coverage is kind of the be all and end all.
Have you got any sort of examples of where and why PR can actually fail and how to avoid that happening? And it's not necessarily PR as a sort of sole thing failing, but in terms of how it's integrated within a company or how it sort of works with maybe marketing.
Good question. Well, I think generally what I tend to find, and I guess there's another fairly recent example of, was it yesterday, which kind of did a report on kind of the best and worst online retail experiences. Homebase came out as the worst. And sort of you get these comments that, oh, that's terrible PR. It's like, well, it's not terrible PR, it's just terrible business. PR can't fix that website. It's like you've got to understand as a business that you've got to have a better website. I always use this analogy with restaurants and kind of bad reviews, and they're like, oh, it's terrible PR. It's like, well, it's not, it's just a bad chef, or it's bad service or whatever it is. It's like things like that PR can't fix. But again, it comes back to this PR issue within PR, is that people always describe that as, ooh, bad PR. And it's like, well, it's not, it's just bad business. It's bad business practices. And the quicker I think that you can get PR people to the decision-making level to be able to say to a restaurant or to Homebase, by the way, this Which report is going to be out in 3 months. Buck your ideas up, otherwise we're going to come bottom of that list. Or to that restaurant, it's like, look, I had an experience in your restaurant last night. That waiter was awful. It's like, you're going to get some terrible TripAdvisor reviews. Until that time comes that kind of PR is then at the top of that and kind of sat on that top table, I think you're going to carry on getting this kind of misapprehension that kind of anything that happens bad in a business is bad PR. And that's a problem for PR a little bit, because it's always described like that.
Do you think having that lack of a person at the top table is causing sort of one of the roots to the cause of that issue then?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Really short answer, yes. Until that feedback loop is complete, until organisations accept that they need to be not just speaking to their customers, stakeholders, but listening to them and acting on that feedback, which is what PR is all about. It's our job to not just write the press release and send it out to the press, but to actually understand what people already think, what people are already saying about the organisations we represent, and feeding that back into the what are we doing. So if it's actually, does that mean staff in that restaurant need better training? That's our job to say this needs to happen. And if PR isn't represented at a senior level, you end up with that feedback coming and kind of sitting here, and then the decisions are made up here. So you're never going to make fully informed decisions if it's not represented.
Yeah, totally. I've been in situations in the past where I've kind of battled my way to the top table because I need to know everything that's going on. Even if you think that operations is of no interest of mine, actually everything to do with this business is of interest of mine, because if I'm listening to what people are saying on the outside and I go, hang on a second, we've been doing that for ages. Even if I don't know, I can't think of an example because confidentiality, but yeah, I think by having that voice and listening all the time and being able to say, actually, you know what, that's an opportunity for us in whatever guise, not necessarily a press release, but something else that can bolster the profile of the business.
Do you think there's an opportunity then there for SMEs to have that sort of integrated from the beginning, and actually they can start building that in from the very start to make sure there's someone there? How do they then identify when that time is right to bring that person in, or should it be from the very beginning?
So I actually think a lot of business founders, the people who are starting their own business, they're thinking about PR as they're setting up their business. Mm-hmm. They're doing the SWOT analysis. They're looking at the marketplace and working out where that gap is. They're working out who they are going to be to their customers. And that's part of PR. So, but it's also part of general business. At what point you split that out and dedicate an individual team member or staff member to just doing the PR part of that. I think probably varies from organisation to organisation, depends on your budget and funding, and but I think recognising that comes in right at the start is really important.
Yeah. I think it's and that battle to be at the top table. You kind of want that startup or that SME to think that I'm at that stage where now I need a proper legal team, or I need a proper accountant or an accountancy firm. I still don't believe that kind of PR is viewed alongside those as important in my growth. Yeah. I need to understand kind of how I'm going to communicate myself to the wider public. And so that's a tricky kind of question. At what stage? The earlier the better. Obviously we're going to say that, but I think it needs to be considered on that level. That so often with startups and SMEs, it's like, I can't just keep doing the numbers myself here because it's getting too big. I can't keep kind of writing the employment contracts or whatever it might be because it's getting too big and too many. I just don't think PR and communications is thought of in that way enough. The smart ones, I think, do get it. You're absolutely right, and they're kind of thinking that way already, which is hopefully an easier sell to be able to say to a startup or an SME. Well, you're already kind of thinking
You're on the right lines.
Yeah.
And I think so. I've worked with a lot of startups or businesses that are literally at day one of operating, and coming back, I guess, to the question about examples of PR failing. Naming no names, but I've seen organisations where their first kind of handful of hires, there's a technical director or a CTO, there's a chief finance officer brought in really early on, and then there's an intern or a graduate brought in to do the PR, and there's no one that they're not experienced. They might have a great qualification, they might be really capable, but they don't have that strategic level of thinking. And they're also in an organisation that's small enough that there's no one to teach them or direct them. And then those business leaders wonder why their PR campaign isn't bringing in the results that they're expecting. But it's because they've got someone doing tactical, busy work, writing press releases and copy and sending out some tweets or posting on Instagram and wondering why that's not linking back to the business objectives. But it's because they've prioritised strategic level roles for everything else except PR.
I think sometimes PR should be changed to BR and it should be brand relations, because actually a startup, like what you've just been saying there, they are so passionate about the brand that they're creating, but they'll still, like you say, they'll still have an intern doing the brand relations. But actually, if you're thinking about it as where's this brand going to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, you would work to build a strategy for the brand. But when I think it's public relations, they're like, we'll get to it, we'll figure that out when it comes to it. But actually it's all encompassing.
My favourite, our founder does that. Oh, yeah, they can do that. They're great at speaking to the press. About what? At what time? I just the assumption that actually PR professionals like us, that we haven't studied, we don't continuously develop our professional skills, that there's not that expertise. We don't have those expertise in some ways, that actually just anybody can send some tweets out. That's what you guys do, right?
I love that when you're like, just ring this guy and just sort that out, and it's like, okay, so shall I just join the finance team this week? Because apparently we all know what each other does, and you don't. No. Sorry.
I think there's a role for public relations professionals and agencies as well. Though I think some perhaps have a tendency to. We're talking about demystifying it more for people, but I think some perhaps play on mystifying it a little bit too much, and I think there's a role to be played there, because it can be seen as a dark art, it can be seen as all these things, and to confuse your customer to think that they need you and need to keep you on for longer for financial gain, I think's a risky thing to do, and I think that's what fundamentally is possibly damaging PR, is the fact that there are perhaps some rogue agencies out there that are willing to take the money month on month for what are they delivering? And by confusing the client further into things like, what is a return on investment, what do you actually spend your time doing, isn't helpful for the broader picture.
What would your advice be then to SMEs in spotting those dodgy agencies over finding sort of one that's worthwhile? Because I guess if that's your first experience, it's hard to know, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I think you've just got to keep asking questions. I think it's so important to keep touching base with whoever it is looking after your PR. I think setting out from the outset some real clear goals about what you want to achieve, but agree them together, not a case of I want £1 million more turnover, and then the PR saying, yep, that's fine, we'll go and do that for you, because it's not going to happen. It needs to be clear, it needs to be thought out, it needs to be aligned with the business objective, strategy, all these kind of things. And if the agency or the person you're talking to isn't asking those questions, then they're probably not the right person, because if they're just saying, yeah, we're going to send out 3 press releases a month, I'm going to get you this amount of clicks to your website or this amount of views on the news coverage, then that's not what PR should be about.
Guarantee either.
And I think ask to speak to some of their clients. If an agency is good at what they do, they wouldn't mind you speaking to people for those testimonials, not just what's printed on the website or in a beautiful pamphlet. Speak to businesses that are similar to yours. If you're speaking to an agency and all of their clients are in software sales and you're selling beauty products, it might not be the right agency for you. So go and speak to organisations that are a similar size, that have similar objectives, and find an agency that knows that sector.
I think you want an agency as well that's asking you difficult questions. I think if they're not afraid to really get to the heart of your business and ask some quite tricky, maybe upsetting questions in a way, that's the role, that's what it should be. It should get to the heart of everything. And whether they're not doing that and just glossing over things, then it's not what it should be about. I think as long as the SME itself are happy to hear those kind of questions and happy to actually have an honest look at themselves, and that's how the relationship will grow and be what it should be. But if those tricky questions aren't being asked, then it's not right.
And if you're paying, as an SME, if you're paying for someone's to support you, you want to let them support you. You're not going to get all the value if you're then demanding that they just follow what you say, because they're the experts. So even being a PR person in-house, there are particular activities that I am not an expert in. I'm in-house, so I cover a really broad range of, I've got a broad range of responsibilities. So the people I bring in, whether or not that's a freelance or an agency, I want their experience and their expertise, and I want them to teach me as much as I want them to help me deliver something that needs to be delivered. So you have to have those tough conversations. I think that's where the value comes.
One of the questions that came in was how can sort of small businesses raise awareness on a limited budget and capacity as well? I think as well, when that brief tends to come in, the first question is always, how much does it cost and how much can I get from it? Obviously, budget is a very important thing to any business, but for SMEs it can be quite tight. Where do you think that needs to come into the thought process, and how important is it that that's sort of the sole focus of those conversations?
So I think with the number of tools that are available for free to anyone, whether or not you're a PR specialist or not, there's a lot that organisations can do with a very, very limited budget. I think if budget is a real concern, you need to be thinking less about what you want to say as an organisation and more about what do your customers, your clients, what do they need? What information do they need? What support do they need? What do they care about? And if you focus on that and keeping your brand relevant to them, you can do a lot with not much more than the tools that are available to everyone. Mm-hmm.
I think kind of ideas cost nothing as well a little bit, but it's kind of having some context to those ideas. I think, you use something like week before, Greg's is, must have cost them, a couple of £100 just to flip their sign over. But that was based around knowing that they were going to have an enormous audience at that moment on Northumberland Street, knowing last year that kind of, 2,000 people took pictures of that Phoenix window. So it was in context, but actually that idea of flipping the sign, the cost was, even to, a giant like Greg's, was probably only £200 or something like that. But actually they completely hijacked the news agenda, not just in this region, but that sort of went national. So smart ideas that are in context, I think, is another kind of great opportunity to do some fairly low cost, execute some fairly low cost opportunities.
And then obviously capacity was sort of the second end of that. Founders and sort of SMEs, they're small, there's they're sort of doing a lot of different things and almost doing a lot of different roles. How can they get the most, because you see it quite often that they're not almost getting the most out of PR because they can't put the time towards it, and that's almost the reason that they say they're not going to do it. I don't have the time to dedicate towards it. How can they still get the most out of PR and make sure it's core to their company without it being a massive time burden on them?
I think it's maximising what you have. I think part of it, again, comes down to fundamentals of knowing your audience. I think that's so important. But when you do something for PR, whatever that may look like, it's about, if you've got one piece of content, how else can that be reproduced? So having a real sort of quality over quantity approach, I think, is going to be key. So, can a news story be turned into a blog article? Can it be a video? Could it be video, again, edited down for social media? So it's really sort of probably looking at a piece of content and looking at it broader and thinking, right, yes, it was going to take a little bit of time to create this, but actually, from this one thing, you're going to grow, you're going to get across all these channels, you're going to reach all these people in a tailored way, in a way that suits your audience on those channels. So suddenly from one idea, from one little bit of PR, you can get a whole range of other things, and how PR can trigger following marketing campaigns as well. And it's how, again, linking closer together those different strands and really sort of sweating the good things about your company and what you can do, and how you can turn that into more engaging material.
What would you identify as the main differences between agency and in-house then? What can in-house bring the agency can't, and vice versa?
So I guess in-house you've got a very deep understanding in-depth understanding of your organisation, what you do, the value that you offer to your customers or clients, the pain points of that, like your particular organisation. And then agency, if it doesn't have 2 years or 3 years or 10 years to build that level of understanding. So I think you do need the best relationships are when you've got both, because I know I can summarise all of that experience and all of that knowledge into the points that an agency would need. The challenge being in-house is that you're typically responsible for a huge amount of different types of communication. So it's not just your marketing channels, it's not just your media outreach, it's also stakeholder or shareholder or board management, it's internal comms, looking after your staff. So as an individual, as a small in-house team, you quite often do need that additional resource or capacity that freelancers and agencies can bring. And when we've got big ambitious projects, that's when we look outside of our organisation either for the additional support generally, or for the specialised skills that we don't have as an in-house team.
So from your guys' perspective, what do you feel an agency brings that might not necessarily be in-house day to day?
I think there's potentially a breadth of experiences that you can draw on from parallels from other industries, for instance, or from other clients, or it comes back to this kind of who do you know kind of concept as well. It's like you've got within an agency, the theory would be that they're working on multiple kind of clients, and so therefore there are multiple opportunities to develop relationships with media contacts that a new client might particularly be keen to kind of exploit. So I think there's things like that in terms of scale that an agency might be able to bring to an SME or a business of any size that can immediately be plugged into an SME's kind of communications plan.
Cool. Yeah.
I think what's been interesting actually for me moving to the Roundhouse from being in-house is things I didn't actually consider before I went. So it's not necessarily sitting next to fellow PR people, but it's sitting next to technical developers, for example, and actually being able to get the background on how things are built and how things actually are put together, which can then actually inform what you do, your practice, how you actually recommend communications. So actually that cross skills of sitting in the same office of technical people, of designers, of video production people, that's what I found so useful in terms of just gaining more from them, which then I can inform my own work. And in-house, I rarely talk to the IT team, for example. They were in a different building across the other side of the city, to be honest. So there was never that connection. Whereas actually in an agency, I think there's such a more willingness and openness to collaborate across skills, and I think that's been so beneficial for my work.
Yeah, I think in-house has got a bit of catching up to do, actually. I don't mean with you, actually, because you work for a company that's championing startups and innovation, but I've worked for SMEs and professional services, and from an in-house point of view, it was difficult because, you know, they don't necessarily value the profession or the craft as yet. But with an agency, everyone's on the same page, everyone knows what everyone does, you want to share information. I'm not saying one's better, I just think that maybe in-house has got a little bit to learn.
Yeah, I think from speaking to other people who work in-house, I've been very lucky to work in organisations where I get that seat at the table, as it were, where I'm involved in those conversations about what are we trying to do, what are we trying to achieve, like our reputation needs to be in order to deliver the services that we're asked to deliver. But there's a lot of people that their day-to-day is being asked to write a blog post and then being asked to like put some stuff on social media, and if that's what your in-house person is doing, it would be the same as if you paid an agency to do it. That to me feels like a waste of someone's time and a waste of your money, whether or not that's an agency's bill or a freelancer's bill or your staff salary, if you're not letting that PR person do their job and actually be providing that feedback to the senior team.
I think one of the real benefits of working in-house is actually, as you say, if you've got that seat right at the top, you can, particularly I think in crisis situations, I think you can not only manage them really closely, but you can perhaps avoid them as well. You can see them coming and you can actually do something about it, whereas perhaps as an agency, you're always slightly just behind. So therefore the crisis has already happened before you actually have to do something about it. You know, arguably, but perhaps again, what I found in-house being near the top is, okay, I can see this coming, let's not do this, or okay, I know what's happened, let's get around the table, let's manage that situation. And again, that's where an in-house PR professional really, I think, shines, is that when things go wrong, you take the lead, no matter hierarchy, no matter different skill sets. That's where you come into your own and say, right, I'm going to manage the situation, you do this, I'm in control, let's sort this out.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, all of you. Just to summarise then, it'd be good to get one piece of advice or one sort of key outtake from the talk today that you would give to an SME sort of considering PR.
Have those conversations early. So even if you're not ready to take on an agency under contract, or you're not ready to hire someone in-house, be thinking about it and be talking to people who work in PR, because you'll get a better understanding of what it can do for you, and it means that when you are ready to start spending that money, you're ready to go. You don't have to start the research.
Yeah, I think probably don't think of PR and marketing in isolation. I think of them as a force to work together, to be combined. It's not a case of either or will work for you. It's a case of if they work together effectively, you're going to get more from them. You're going to get better results and more return on investment.
Education, understand what is achievable via PR, and I think very quickly they'll kind of people will realise that it needs to be treated as one of the many kind of management disciplines that deserve that spot on the top table, I think.
I think just treat it as all-encompassing messaging around your brand. So it's not just an odd press release here and there, it's where you're going in 5 years and 10 years and the kind of company that you want to be, and it should inform your culture, it should inform your marketing, it should inform everything, really.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys.